Okay, so in this evening's Rugby World Cup game, we saw New Zealand play Namibia in Toulouse. Now, the result wasn't in doubt. New Zealand obviously had to put in a performance following that poor performance against France. They scored 71 points. However, there were still issues with discipline, and they've had a player sent off. So there are still issues with this New Zealand side, and the weather had an impact as well. This is the first match where we've had rain. So the try scoring starts early with Roygaard with his first try in 2 minutes. Then there's the McKenzie no try on 6 minutes because he knocks it on. They're trying to rush the play a little bit there. Roygaard's second try comes from a scrum turnover. So they got their scrummaging right, which was an issue against France. They dominated the forward exchanges. Swanepoel scores the only points up for Namibia on 11 minutes. Sammy Sony's tries disallowed for obstruction. So again, technical errors and technical penalties as well are creeping into the game. They're still not getting all their plays right. There were a few technical penalties as well. That's just a silly penalty to give away when they basically scored a very good pushover maul try. Then there's the serious injury to Malan, the inside centre for Namibia, and I have noticed that the pitches haven't been great. Now, they may look nice and green, but they have been cutting up, and in this case, his studs have got caught in the ground, and it's a leg break with a double dislocation. So his ankle's facing the wrong way, his knee's facing the wrong way, and his leg is also broken because his foot gets stuck in the ground. It's an innocuous thing. It's not a heavy hit. He's in the process of doing a clear out, and his right leg is facing 3 different directions. It's a very horrible leg injury. Credit to the broadcasters who didn't show any replays of that. I think that's a French thing more than an actual broadcast. I think that's how the French broadcasters work when serious injuries like that occur. The response from the crowd and the players was fantastic. And it was good to see him give the thumbs up as he leaves the field on the medical card. But that was a lengthy stoppage in play. McKenzie finally gets his first try on 19 minutes. And Vaniaku scores the bonus point try in 25 minutes. Leonard Brown scores his try in 35 minutes. McKenzie scores his second try in 38 minutes. And that ends the scoring for the first half. And New Zealand, while they're doing some great stuff in attack, discipline, the penalty count at one point was much higher than Namibia's. And penalties like that, obstruction penalty, when they do score a try that's disallowed, those are coach killers. And in bigger games, like they did against France, where they didn't perform in the second half, and later on in the tournament, they've got to iron out those silly errors. But again, the penalty count was too high. It did take him a good 8 minutes for them to score their first try in the second half through De Groot, and we'll mention De Groot later on because he's been a bit of a naughty boy. Papali'i scores his try. Havili scores a try. Clark gets his try. He ran his lines very, very well throughout the game. Ioane scores the final try in 77 minutes. So they're ticking over the scoreboard. And Namibia, I mean, they threw some big hits. They made more dominant tackles, which is very, very interesting. So in the tackle area, Namibia dominated that aspect of the game. And they kept trying. I mean, they didn't get a try in this game, which is unfortunate. Their handling errors and execution let them down. But this is where, again, as I said in last night's video, we've got to get these Tier 2 and Tier 3 nations playing more regular internationals, and which means they will spend more time together in camp, they'll spend more time learning combinations, and they'll get more experience at international level, because there was a period in the second half towards the end where they were pinning New Zealand in the corner, and they had a good rolling maul, they had a lot of ball, and it was that final pass, that final drive, handling errors, just little bits of execution that let them down. But as I say, like Uruguay last night proved that a Tier 2 nation can push a Tier 1 nation all the way for 80 minutes. Tonight obviously wasn't the case. You can definitely see the gap in class between a Tier 1 nation that plays 15, 20 internationals a year compared to a Tier 2, Tier 3 nation that may play 5 internationals if they're lucky in a year at maximum. And This is where World Rugby, if they want to continue to develop the game at the lower levels and develop the lesser nations, because some have really developed, like Uruguay, they need to improve the international calendar for these Tier 2 and Tier 3 nations. Now, apart from the leg injury to Milan, which is unfortunate and was quite nasty, and it was innocuous, his foot gets stuck in the ground and there's a leg break and double dislocation in there. That's what I can gather from looking at how his leg looked on the live feed. De Groot's yellow card, which is upgraded to a red for a high shot. The mitigation they could argue is, there's another tackler, tackling the player. The player's still upright. He's lined him up. He's made no attempt to wrap, and he's led with the shoulder into the opposition player's head. And with a fair bit of force, he has lined him up and drilled him. There is no attempt at all to make a wrapping motion. That is a no-arms tackle. And it was upgraded to a red. Now, New Zealand's discipline in the last few test matches, regardless that they've won this game, has been poor, and that has got to be a concern going forward. Against France, their discipline fell apart and they collapsed in the second half. And as the second half did wear on, they were giving away more penalties. And there was a spate in the first half when when they take the lead and then Swanepoel slots his penalty that they were giving away, I think, 5 or 6 penalties before Namibia gave away their first. And this is when they're winning. This is really, really odd that you're in a winning position, you're in a dominant position, and you're still giving away silly penalties and then foul play. And they've had a few yellows and reds in recent games against Africa. They had poor discipline against France. They had poor discipline, and now against Namibia, they've had poor discipline. And De Groot could be looking at a lengthy stint on the sidelines. Tom Curry's obviously got a 3-game ban reduced to 2. I think there was a bit of mitigation in Tom Curry's one. That's the other red card in the tournament, but I think this one could be a lengthier ban, simply because how the player is still upright, the attacking player coming at him, he lines him up and he drills him with the shoulder in the head. That is the type of play we need to get out of the game. Accidental head contact like Tom Curry's and Segren's for Chile, for example, last weekend, they're going to happen. Obviously, I think yellow is where we're going to go with that, but in this case, you can't argue mitigation for that one. I think De Groot is going to be spending potentially the rest of the pool stages and maybe the first knockout game not playing. And that's something that I think is notable about this New Zealand side is their penalty count is far too high and their discipline isn't good enough. And Namibia, they kept trying, which was good to see. When they won breakdowns, you could definitely see that there was passion there. But again, that lack of regular internationals and lack of team building in a sense, when you have a team in camp for a tournament like a Six Nations, for example, and World Cup qualifiers, and then just regular internationals throughout the year, you can see that does have an impact on team development and closing that gap. Some nations like Georgia, for example, and Uruguay have closed that gap from those Tier 2 nations. Fiji as well. Fiji made the knockout stages before, but lesser nations like Namibia, Portugal tomorrow, for example, Chile, they're going to find it harder to close that gap and make that next step where they improve. So New Zealand, comfortable win, but discipline is an issue, and they finished the game with 14 players. So this is becoming a recurring theme now with New Zealand. It is a worrying trend for them, and later in the tournament that could come back to really cost them in a key game, maybe the final pool stage match, maybe a quarter-final, semi-final, final. They need to clear up their discipline because that is going to potentially be their undoing, and that's their biggest weakness I can see so far in the tournament and with the game against Africa. So there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts in the comments section below. What do you feel about the De Groot yellow card being upgraded to a red, and how long do you think his suspension is going to be? Thank you very much, and I'll have some more content for you very, very soon.